So the other morning I got up really early and took a walk on a nearby mountainside here in southern Vermont. I was just looking for some, pretty scenes, fall captures. I was just actually a few days before looking at my schedule and realizing that I didn't really have any free days between now and when I thought peak colors here in southern Vermont were going to be passed. So I said, I'm going to get up early and go take some photographs. I thought it would be nice now to take a few moments, share some of those photos that I've taken on that morning. It wasn't just on the mountainside. Share them in Lightroom and just kind of work through a couple of them and have you watch me work. I don't have anything really planned to show you other than here is me editing these photos slightly, maybe making them look a little bit nicer. Without overdoing it. I talk about that a lot. It's something that I see. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. A lot of folks are very quick to oversaturate their photos, and if that's a look you like, that's fine. I am not a big fan of that. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks in Lightroom that will allow you to get those colors nice and punchy, but still keep the realism there and the realisticness in the image. It looks natural. Alright, so let's take a look at a few of these images. So the first one I shot wasn't actually shot on the other morning. This was in the afternoon, and I really liked the way these maple leaves, so one, the color, and the fact that two, that they were backlit. And this image is pretty nice. I think some of these images I'm thinking about Instagram as a destination, some of them just my own private gallery. I'm not quite sure that any of them are amazing enough to go up to 500 pics is usually where I put my best of my best images, and there's a link to 500 pics down below my profile on 500 pics. Notice that there aren't a ton of photos on there. I picked just the very best, my very favorites, and put them up there. And other ones go in different places like my Facebook page and things for friends to share. But so here I am in the develop module of Lightroom 5. I haven't done anything to this other than a preset on import that I call pop, and all that does is add a little bit of clarity. And that's, you can think of clarity in a similar way to sharpening. And if we drag this to the right a little bit more, you can see that the edges get more and more defined, and they can start to look a little over sharpened. You really have to be careful about clarity and sharpness if Facebook is the final destination for these images, because Facebook adds additional sharpening and things can look very crunchy, and that's not a good thing, very quick. So I'm just going to add just a tiny bit more to that clarity. I really like the exposure here. I'm curious to see what this branch that's in the shade looks like. This is a raw file, so I have a lot of ability here. I can come over to my shadow slider and I can move that to the right, and you can see that the detail in the branch is coming out while the brightness of the leaves remains the same. Look at that, just a little bit. They brighten up in the shadows just a little bit, and I think I like that. I don't like the silhouette of the branch that much of a difference. And we can play with our white palettes and our tint, but I think those things look really nice right now. They're set as shot. We can switch over to auto and see what it thinks. It warmed it up a little bit more, which is not bad. I'm going to raise those shadows up just a little bit more. I really like seeing a little bit of the detail in the branch. And then I'm pretty happy with that. If I was going to go to Instagram, I'd hit my crop tool and I would take this and put it at our 1:1. And then I would look at what my options were for 1:1. And that's actually not bad. So I might have a destination of Instagram for this at some point, kind of this nice bright leaves here. Same tree, next image, slightly different perspective, looking further up into the tree. I have to say that this blurry leaf down here in the bottom right corner is a little distracting. So I might try right away saying, well, if I was going to put this on Instagram, or well, let's just say how much we can crop. And so I just chose my crop tool, dragged in, and this was shot with, I think, the 5D Mark II, or sorry, Mark III. So I've got a good bit of room to crop there. Let me just check real quick and see what camera, if I shot it with the 70D or the 5D Mark III. No, that was the 5D Mark III, and so this is a 24 megapixel file. And it gives you some room to crop. Remember, I have a tip about, or a video about cropping to zoom. If your destination is just the web digital format, you can crop a good bit before you're going to get into any kind of trouble. And similar here, I'm going to just kind of, actually a lot of similarities. Let's try, I'm just going to hit previous, and it's going to bring over all of the settings from the first image. And you know what? I think that's pretty terrible. It's done a much worse job of choosing. So I'm going to choose as shot to go back to that white balance. And then I'm going to reset that crop tool because it took the 1-to-1 from Instagram. And bring it in there. And I kind of like that we have a little bit of blur down here, almost kind of a leaf vignette around our central focus, but it's not too distracting now. And you know, I don't think this image is anything too special, but I do really love these colors in here. And I wonder if I can bring my clarity up just a little bit more. I was shooting at f2.8, so our depth of field is fairly shallow. We got this in focus, but then right away these are out of focus. And that's making me not like this image as much as when I first started. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and put this back down to 0 rating and get rid of it. So that's gone. Alright, here's this next image that I've already worked on a little bit. This was a beautiful maple leaf that I picked up off the ground and put on this fallen birch trunk. And all I've done so far is brought up clarity, vibrance, and saturation. Now you have to be careful with saturation. That is really the whole picture deal. And so you can see that the birch, especially up at the top, is starting to turn a little bluish in color, which is not accurate. So I'm actually going to bring that back down, and I'm going to come down here into my color section, and I have all of these little color tabs. And now I can really affect the hue, saturation, and luminance of individual colors. So what I really want is this red leaf to be a little bit more red, more true to life. It wasn't quite this purple. The camera picked up a little more purple. And so I'm just going to move this a little bit to the right. Actually, I don't like that. Let's go to a little bit that way. I'm not crazy about that either. Let's go down to our magenta and see if we can take our magenta over to the right a little bit. And now I'm starting to see a little bit more red that I like. So, and we can come back up and we can increase our saturation there so that leaf really starts to get vibrant, but we are not increasing saturation of the whole image, only the red, so our birch bark stays nice and clean and white. We can actually come down to the blue here and decrease that a little bit and really make sure that the birch bark is almost black and white, no hint of blue at all up there at the top. I think that's a nice clean image. I like that. Now here is the first image from the morning, and this was shot out from a fire tower up on top of a mountain. Looking out over there is a lake down in this valley, and so we have this nice kind of fog inversion happening here. Not a ton of color, but I do love the way these ridges kind of fade into the distance. Let's come up here, and first thing I want to try increasing is our contrast. And it's going to really kind of bring out the contrast between the sky and each of these rolling hills or mountains. That looks pretty nice. Now I wish we were a little bit brighter down here in the bottom to pick out some of this color. And there is the gradient tool right here, and I'm going to go over here and go to exposure. I'm going to drag up, and you can see that it's doing the opposite of what I want. It's making it darker, but if I now drag this exposure slider to the right, I am only affecting the area underneath that gradient, and it is a smooth transition, which I really like, from here up above. So that's what these three lines are showing you. Bottom is the maximum, the start of the gradient, middle is the middle of the gradient, and the top line is the end of the gradient. So it smoothly fades this setting out over the course of this gradient mask, it's called. A new feature of Lightroom 5 is the fact that you can also do a radial mask as well. So I like that we're a little bit brighter now. I feel like this image is a little bit more layered with the bright in the foreground, a little bit darker around the lake where the fog is laying in the valley, and then darker still in the mountains until we get up into the sky. I'm going to click Done so that gradient is hidden. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to bring it back for a second by clicking on the tool, clicking on the little dot there, and I'm going to bring up the contrast down there just a little bit. So it's a little bit brighter, but we don't have that kind of washed out look that we were getting with just a little bit more contrast. And now I see just a hint of color up in the sky. And so I'm going to try using that gradient tool again. So this is a new one. I'm just going to drag down just a little bit. And again, exposure was set down, so I'm going to bring that back up. And I'm going to bring up the saturation just a little bit in the sky. Actually, I need to bring that exposure back up a little bit. I don't know. See if we can get any of that color out of the sky there. And maybe warm that up just a tiny bit in the temperature. I think that might be all we can get out of there without doing a whole lot more. Let's bring the clarity slider all the way up and see if we get any more detail out of the clouds. We get a little bit out of there. I'm going to bring that back because I don't want to do it too much. And now I'm going to say close. So again, this image isn't amazing, and looking at it, it feels like it might be a little bit crooked. So my crop tool, I'm just going to drag to the right just a little tiny bit and hit enter on the keyboard. And now I feel like it's a little straighter. And I'm fairly happy with that. I could take time to come in here with the mask paintbrush and individually paint some of these hills and bring out some clarity in there as well, but I don't think I want to do that right now, although I'm doing it as I'm saying I don't want to. And I do like the increased brightness back there, but then it's starting to look a little funny down there. So I'm going to Control Z that and get rid of that, and Control Z again, and again, and now it's back to, I don't believe we have any now. Good. Show selected mask overlays. Yes, none are selected. Or none are there, so that's good. It's done. Alright, let's move on to this next image. So this mountain is an old ski slope, and it's been closed for years, and now there's some hiking paths on it. This was shot towards the rising sun, and just really got some really nice colors out here, but we also still have that kind of morning fog or haze that we're working with. I've lowered the exposure on this image already. When I first shot, oh no, I'm sorry, I haven't. That's looking at the mask. I haven't done anything to this image other than the clarity. The next thing I want to try is increasing this contrast to see if we can take away some of that morning haze. A little bit there. And I'm going to increase the blacks or decrease the blacks. I'm going to bring them down a little bit. That seems a little bit nicer. And you know what? I'm going to try that same trick again of getting my gradient and dragging down from the top. It's a little bit trickier because we have these trees that reach up in the foreground, so we're going to have to watch to make sure the tops of those aren't caught too much in that gradient. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit, the contrast up. Yeah. Not much we can do on that far side there. And let's see if we can increase the clarity a little bit more. And the sharpness. Close. And overall, let's come back into our color again, nothing new here, and let's bring our reds, make our reds a little bit more red, our oranges a little bit more orange by increasing the saturation of those. And that leaves, you know, the green and the sky, so we don't get the fakey blue, we don't get the oversaturated green, although we could get green a little bit more vibrant, just a tiny bit. Bring that out. And that's alright. I'm happy with showing you some of the settings I did here, but I don't think that this is the most amazing image. Let's skip over to this image. So we're starting to see similar things here. Some red maple leaves kind of sparkled in dew. You know what? Let's skip that too. And let's talk a little bit about this one. So we've got some nice reflection colors. Some nice colors reflected in the water. You can actually see this is a little lake for swimming. There's a little swimming pond there. and some little thing right there. That's just a rock. And then there's a swimming pond platform right there, and just the beginnings of an edge of a beach there. Let's try bringing up our exposure just a well, kind of like just a tiny touch. Let's increase our contrast just a little bit. We're dealing with fog coming off the lake, and there's fog up on top of the trees as well. Bring up our clarity just a tiny bit, our vibrance, and I'm not going to touch saturation there, but I'll come into the color again, and a little red. And I think that looks fairly nice. I'm curious what this looks like in the 1-to-1 crop, so I'm going to come down here and say if I wanted this to be a 1-to-1 crop. And I don't like that, so I'm going to undo that. For those of you who like to share lots on Instagram, there are apps that will allow you to keep your 1-to-1 ratio around an image, so you can put up an image that's in your 4:3 or your 3:2 or even your 16:9 or whatever aspect ratio you want, and then it will just basically build a border around it to keep it square. And so if I wanted to share this on Instagram, that's probably what I would do here, because I do like to be able to see the full from top to bottom of this reflection. Let's just try this gradient tool real quick down here at the bottom and see what we can do with our reflection part of this. So I would like to increase the exposure. No. Yeah, I'm not super impressed with that. There you go. All right, moving on. So some turkeys that were wandering around the edge of somebody's yard, and I like the way their little wattles, I don't know if that's the official name, was catching the sun. I am going to crop this because I cut this guy off over here on the right, and I left a bunch of room at the top. So I'm going to grab on the top right and bring this down. So, and then kind of come over just a little bit. So, there we go. And got some nice detail in the fuzz around them. It's not extremely sharp, but it is certainly sharp enough. This one is pecking at some leaf there, bits of whatever's at its feet. And but let's go through our basics here. I'm going to increase our contrast just a little bit because we're shooting almost into the sun, so we get a little bit washed out. And increasing contrast will bring that back. I'm going to decrease the blacks as well. Whites look good to me, and clarity will bring up just a tiny bit. And I think that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. I'm curious what that looks like in a 1-to-1 crop though too. So if we do this, and if I brought this over here, yeah, that would work as well. So maybe you'll see that on Instagram at some point in the not too distant future. Although I'm not so sure now that I'm looking at it more. I'm going to undo that and leave it to crop the way it was. You see a little bit of bug there. Do I have to undo crop one more time? There we go. And this final shot here, this is another one that I think I'm going to end up ditching. I really like the sun in the light rays at the end of this road, but I think that this way too much foreground is completely uninteresting, and I could crop that way down, but even cropped way down, I don't think that it is an image that I'm super excited about. It's not bad, but it's not quite as exciting. I knew about this road in certain times of the year. Well, obviously like fall, it really lights up in nice yellows, but the light wasn't quite right for it at this time. So here we are with just, I shot a ton of images that morning. I didn't actually shoot 221. There's some images from a earlier shoot that are in there, but I shot probably over 100 images, and after picking my favorites out, we're down to just about 3 or 4. So pretty small keeper rate from that. But for those of you who didn't see, I did also get to see a moose on that morning, so that was fairly special. I did not get a good picture of the moose, very blurry picture, so that was a bummer, but it was a wonderful moment. So if you have any questions about Lightroom or any things I kind of showed, again, I didn't really show anything specific. This was just kind of watching me work through using Lightroom. You can just leave a comment down below, or even better, come over and find me on Facebook, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. There is a deal right now of Lightroom is $30 off if you're buying a DSLR. And it might not seem like, you know, an amazing deal, because $30 when you're buying an $800, $900 camera isn't a whole lot of money, but it is nice. And I get asked a lot what software I recommend for editing, and it is Lightroom. Lightroom. Shooting RAW, which is what you should do to get the best images out of your camera and then give you the best ability to edit them. And even if you don't want to spend time editing, there are simple things that you can do that Lightroom makes it really easy on import to make all of the pictures look a little bit better. I've shown that in some previous videos, and we'll touch on that again in videos about Lightroom soon. All right, thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe.